Hello friends.net, I'm Emil Landworth and you can find me on Twitter at TerraJobs. So this is a stream out of the ordinary because I got all my equipment now and I kind of wanted to try it too. So there's the little child in me that wants to play with stuff. But more importantly, I also want to make sure that I stream a little bit more often because Twitch unfortunately requires you to stream, I think, for 7 consecutive days, not consecutive, but for 7 days a month. Yeah, 7 days a month in order to hit affiliate. And right now I only do once a week. So that means I'm always short by 3 days, which is quite unfortunate because all the other metrics I'm hitting. So I was thinking like, okay, let's do some extra streams and then see how this actually feels. I don't think I will make this slot every Sunday because that would be quite insane. I generally like the earlier morning slots because, yeah, in the global world, it's important that people can actually watch the stream. So 2 p.m. is not great for everybody else who's outside the US. But as I said in the chat, my sleep rhythm has been destroyed over the last week. I think it's me watching too much YouTube where people play with all the amazing toys they have. And yeah, I think there was a few nights where I stayed up for too long and then bad things happened. Plus, Olia is busy doing demos for Build. And so there was a few nights where she was, I think, never returning to bed. I think she came at 7 a.m. in the morning. And yeah, that also doesn't help the sleep rhythm. So long story short, we will do a stream today. And then I will find another way to do a more regular schedule, probably during the week, probably early morning. So today's topic is going to be Roslyn source generators. So probably some of you have hopefully read the blog post that my friend Philip put together about Roslyn source generators. And basically what it is, it's similar to an analyzer in the sense that it's a plugin to the compiler. Let me zoom in a little bit here. And so basically the idea is that when the compilation runs, the source generator is able to do additional stuff. And the source generator does it by analyzing the source code. So the compiler gives the generator access to all the stuff that you wrote. And then the generator can generate additional new source code. And that new source code now becomes part of the compilation. And then compilation resumes. And so what this allows you to do is some interesting stuff. So for example, you could say, well, I put certain attributes on my types, and then when they are present, then I generate additional types or additional things next to them. What's interesting with source generators is that they are deliberately constrained, so you can't actually change the semantics of the language, so you can't invent new keywords, or you can't basically change C# to something else, right? You can't invent new language constructs, basically. And the way that's being enforced is that you can't modify source code. You can only add new source code. So if you want to add members to type, for example, you have to declare the type as partial, and then the generator can generate a new file where new members show up. And this way it's, a little bit harder for the language to effectively deteriorate into dialects, because the C# team also wants to be able to add new things to the language without breaking every consumer of it, right? So, just for reader of a language, it's always nice if we can all agree what the semantic of the language is, right? If you invent your own new keywords or your own attributes that do some crazy stuff, then it gets much harder to reason about what the source code does. So modifying source code is bad because, well, the source code that you now see on GitHub is not the source code that actually executes, right? And additional source code might have similar issues, but at least you know that what you see is what you get. And there might be additional stuff that's also generated, but the generator generally doesn't get to mess with existing source code. So there's a few demos here that if you haven't read the blog post, you should totally read the blog post, because it's probably by far my favorite feature that C# has done in a while. And it's very similar to analyzers. So analyzers are already out there for a couple of years now, and the generator basically uses the same plugin model that the analyzers also use. So what I want to do today is I want to I want to write a Roslyn generator for our compiler project. So let me just show you what we can use this for. So we have this syntax node thing here. And the syntax node has this method here, getChildren, right? And right now the way this works is I'm effectively using reflection at runtime to walk the type. And the reason I'm doing this is because I'm lazy. basically, right? So the thing is, I have all these things here, like return statement, for example, right? A return statement takes a return keyword and then optionally an expression, right? I don't want to be in the business of keeping to override this getChildren method in every single one of my types, because effectively what this method returns is already dictated by the shape of the type, right? I don't have to, state this over and over again, if you will, right? So I already have an order here in terms of properties, so this is the order in which I want to return them. And right now what this thing does here in our, I guess we should have probably opened this permanently here, syntax node. Let me double click this guy for a moment. So what I just do is I just walk all the properties and I say if this is of type syntax node, then I actually return it. If this is of type syntax list, then I'm going to walk the syntax list. And if it's of type enumerable, then I walk that guy. And so effectively, I only have to write this method now once, which is awesome. And then I'm done with it. I never have to define the getChildren method. What's less awesome about this thing is that this is using reflection, right? And reflection is not free, right? Reflection is an amazing feature, but lots of stuff is happening here, right? So for example, every time you ask for a value, you're effectively boxing that value, right? So this is not a very efficient method right now. You could say, what's the big deal? Who cares? I mean, you're not doing this a million times, but turns out you kind of do this a million times. If you think about what an IDE actually does, I mean, for a batch compiler on the command line, it's usually not a big deal because you walk things effectively once. But even there, it's kind of problematic if every single access is taking forever. But in the IDE context, you walk syntax trees actually a lot more, right? Think about it. Every single time you hover your mouse over something, something has to walk the structure in order to determine what to show. What tooltips to display, all of that, right? Or syntax highlighting does it all the time, right? Or IntelliSense does it all the time, right? So there's a lot of navigation going on. So generally speaking, it would be nice if we could make this efficient. But right now we only have two options. We can either do the method once, or we implement the method once per type. In other words, we're the human generator. We are basically having to implement this method over and over again, which again, in a language, you could argue, man, how many syntax nodes do you have? And that's basically one-time cost. And that's true. But for my purposes here is when I'm still live streaming this thing, I don't want to have to remind myself every single time I add a new syntax construct that I have to do something special. So I would like to do this once and then be done with it. And this is exactly where Roslyn generators come in. So we should be able to leverage that. Isn't being lazy an inherent property a coder has to have in order to be considered a coder? Probably. I mean, being lazy just usually means you only do things once, right? You don't want to repeat yourself. So yeah, I mean, dry, right? Don't repeat yourself is one of those principles that some people like. I like it too because don't repeat yourself. To me, it's less about being lazy. It's more about fragility because you have to state things multiple times and then you can make mistakes. That's also a problem in this method here is because it's kind of error prone, right? If you add new properties to a syntax node because you're still, messing with the language, it's easy to forget that your getChildren method doesn't return it now, and now you have very subtle bugs in your IDE where stuff just doesn't get visited when it should have been. So yeah, I think in my case, I just want to do it once. One thing I want to point out here is that we had this discussion on Twitter. So one thing that always comes up with analyzers and source generators is they're really meant to be packaged as a NuGet package, right? So that means you have a NuGet package somewhere, you install the NuGet package into the consuming project, and then that DLL that has the analyzer or the generator in it now participates in the compilation. In my case, though, I noticed that I almost never have the need to write a generator or an analyzer that is general purpose. Or most of the time, most of the cases where I would like to write one is really specific for my current solution or my current project. It's not really a general purpose analyzer, right? Same here, like our generator is not a general purpose generator, right? It's really specific to our compiler. So there really isn't much of a point of shipping this thing as a NuGet package. I mean, we could, there's nothing fundamentally wrong with it, but it no means every single time we change the analyzer or we change the generator, we have to publish a new version of it, which is not really convenient for our consumption. So what we really want is a project reference to the analyzer or the generator, and then just consume it like anything else, right? And so there was some discussion on how to do this. I posted this little hack here, and then Rainer Sigwald, who actually works on MS Build, commented on this and proposed a much simpler solution. And I was actually amazed. I didn't know this was something you could do. So basically, instead of, in the official samples for the generators right now, what they do is they just have this here, which is effectively a hard-coded reference to the output of the project file, which is not great, right? That's really not what you want to do. So Rainer just changed this to something really quite elegant, I think. It's just a regular project reference, right? So far, so good. And then he just says, well, the output type is not, a reference. The output type is an analyzer in our case. But I don't want to reference this thing from the actual project, right? So in our case, this project that would reference the generator is the compiler. But we don't want the compiler to have a runtime dependency on the generator, right? That's only something that happens at compile time. So basically, this suppresses referencing it. And this is basically the way that says this is an analyzer. Isn't that amazing? It's just 3 lines of code. Super elegant. All right, so now I think it's time. I did all this talking now. Now it's actually time to do stuff. Oh my God, I'm not even in the right branch yet. Also, I want to notice that episode 20 hasn't even been merged yet, which is also not great. So it's almost like there's feature creep going on here. It's almost like I might be a lazy programmer, but also not a very good programmer. All right, so now we are here, and now what we will do is we will create a new project next to our compiler, which will contain our source generator. So this would be probably under a source. So let's create a .NET new class lib. And the output name was going to be Minsk. Generators. Yeah, good enough. And then before we forget, we add it to our solution. So what is a generator? So a generator is fundamentally a net standard library. Why is it net standard? Well, because the C# compiler has to run inside of Visual Studio, and Visual Studio, as you're probably aware of, is running on .NET Framework. So that's why .NET standard. So if you only want the generator to work on .NET Core, then by all means target .NET Core. But that will be super fragile because the compiler really has no way to pick up different binaries. So generally speaking, you really want to have this target net standard. I think the compiler team even recently added logic to reject analyzers that are not compiled for net standard to avoid problems of, oh shit, now stuff blows up at runtime with unresolved references and stuff like that. So we have that. Now the other thing we need to do is we need to reference Roslyn. And actually, I think the blog post already has the right stuff in here. Do I have to add this project sources thingy? Yeah, I don't think so. Let's do this. Let's copy this and see what happens. All right, that's not good. I guess we need this thing after all. Yep, I guess we needed that. All right, so now we actually have Roslyn referenced. And now what we can do is we can implement an iSource generator. I think that's what it's called. Okay, I don't trust this guy here, so Let's reload this guy for a moment. Okay, I probably mistyped it. I did not mistype it. Maybe we just have to give OmniSharp a little bit more time to actually boot up everything. I think now it's ready. I say that, but what is happening here? Why is my IntelliSense not working? Here we go. Yay! So I need to put an attribute on it, and I have to implement the iSourceGenerator interface. And the interface basically has two things: an initialize, where we can register notifications and other stuff, which right now we don't do. And then here we can actually add source files. So hint name is effectively the name that Roslyn will use to report errors. So we can just say this is generated.cs, and then we can say source text from, and then here we can literally just put in some source code. What is this thing called? It's called system.reflection.assembly metadata attribute. So that's going to be our hello world. So we basically just emit an additional assembly level attribute that we can actually see whether it actually worked or not. Let's make this slightly more readable. All right, so now let's actually reference this guy with the trick we just learned. So we go to our thing here, and then we say there's a new item group. And then we say this is a project reference for, let's go up one, Minsk generators, Minsk generators.cs proj. And now I have to remind myself what the actual syntax was. These guys here. And I must have messed up the XML somewhere, even though I can't see it. Oh, there's a closing bracket missing. All right. Stuff did compile, but now the moment of truth. Okay, that's not what I wanted. I wanted to copy this guy here. And then please show me C#, because today is not the time we want to look at IL. Okay, this worked like a charm. What happened here? So we should have seen another attribute popping up here, which right now is not the case. Yeah, the backslash in the path should not be the problem. Oh, I think I know what the problem is. The problem is we are running against the wrong version of C#. So like many features in C#, this feature is also gated by a preview flag. So we have to put the compiler into preview mode. Without that, the compiler will not use it. And now we actually fail because we did not do it correctly, which is a different problem. So let me actually go back to here. And then in our generator here, we have to specify encoding here. So we have to say encoding dot UTF-8. Look at this. Hooray! Now we actually have our first generator running, which is quite nice. So as you can see, we just emit some strings, and so long the strings compile, everything is fine. If the strings don't compile because you made a mistake in your thingy here, let me just do that for a moment. And then I think I don't even have to do the rebuild stuff. System should be smart enough to handle that. Well, apparently not. Famous last words. Now you basically get an error, and what you get here is the hint name that we passed in earlier. So you can see what this actually does, and this is basically the file name that they use for reporting. Right now, by default, well, I shouldn't say by default. Right now, they're not writing the generated file back to disk at all. It literally just participates in the compilation, which is kind of neat because it means that you don't have to deal with writing them to an object directory or anything crazy like that. I think the idea is that eventually there will be an option that you can specify, probably in MS build, to say, please persist all the generated files to the temp directory, so you can debug them and browse them like a human being. We will probably do this right now by cheating. So what I will probably right now do is I will actually write them to disk as part of the execute thing, which is not great, but works around the issue if we have to look at the stuff by hand. There we go. So now if we run it again, it should work just fine. Right, so far so good. Now let's talk about how we actually do the generation. So what's cool is, so far not a lot of magic happened, right? We just generated some strings and made them part of the compilation. We could have done this years and years ago. But what's cool now is we actually get, in the context here, we actually get the compilation, which is the entirety of the program before our generator runs. If multiple generators participate, each generator gets the same input compilation, which is effectively the user program before any generator ran. So in other words, generators can't depend on each other, which is also a design choice the C# team made so that things are sane. Otherwise, what is the order between analyzers, right, or generators? And so the idea is each generator is self-contained, and the only thing they get in the input is what the user actually wrote by hand. So in our case, we get the compilation of our compiler, and now we can actually do interesting stuff. For example, we can find all the types that generate from that derive from SyntaxNode. So the way we do this is we say, well, give me the compilation, and in our case, we know that it's a C# compilation. So we can just say C# compilation. We can just cast this guy. A real-world analyzer probably wouldn't do that because you don't know whether the input language is C# or VB. But we can get away with that. And then from the compilation, I can ask what is the assembly. And so the assembly is basically our symbolic representation for the assembly that the user is, or that we are compiling currently. So I don't have to parse any syntax nodes. I can literally just say, well, give me all the types in that assembly. Except that, as far as I can tell, there is no method that does that. So let's just write it ourselves for a moment. So we have an IEnumerable of I named type symbol, which is basically our types. Get all types. We pass in the assembly symbol. And then for the assembly symbol, I think there's something like global namespace, which is basically the tree structure of all the namespaces in your program. So all we have to do now is we have to say yeah, what's the easiest way we do it? Yeah, let's just do a list of iname type symbol, in which case we can return a read-only list here. And then we just say something like this: for each var get all types result, and then symbol global namespace, and then return result. And then we can hopefully generate another method here, generate method type or namespace symbol. Is it actually a thing? No, it's namespace or type symbol, right? Oh no, we can say symbol. So if symbol is named type symbol type, then we can say result add type. Apparently I still count type. Doesn't matter whether it's Sunday or Wednesday or 8 a.m. For each child in symbol, and then we just say get all types for result and child. That is unfortunate. Wasn't there? I guess there is a base type here, right? Namespace or type symbol. No, apparently there is no. Oh, I think it's members, right? In get members, yeah. And what returns members? It returns namespace or type symbol. What? Can I convert from iSymbol to? Oh, I see. Okay. Well, let me say if child is namespace or type symbol. Something like that. Yeah, should be good enough. When does the generator actually fire? With an analyzer, it fires when the syntax node is visited. Is this just done when the compiler is run? So that's a good question. So the way the generators work is that they will definitely run when you compile, right? So that seems obvious on the command line. In the IDE, it's a bit more nuanced, right? Because in the IDE, you're typing all the time. So the question is, when should the generator run again? The way I understand it right now is that I think by default, the generator only runs when you hit build in the IDE. Or if you explicitly ask for it. So here you can say, register for syntax notification and initialize method. So you can say, tell me when the syntax has changed, and if so, then I will determine whether I will run or not. So the IDE doesn't automatically kick off all generators every single time you enter a keystroke, because that might be very expensive. At the same time, if you just literally clone the repository from GitHub and you open the thing in the IDE, the generator hasn't run yet. Right, so that means I think by default what happens is it will kick off the analyzers once when the IDE is loading the solution, and then the next time only when the build occurs. And so in the meantime, you can actually subscribe to syntax events and say, well, when certain syntax elements changes, then I know I might be impacted, so I want to run again. which right now we don't do. We probably should do this, but we don't. So that's my understanding. I might be wrong with that, but that's how I understand it. All right, so now we actually have our types, unless I messed up. So for each var type in get all types compilation assembly. I guess let's do this. Now let's actually find our type. So we have a syntax node type, and that's actually very easy to ask for a type, because all we have to do is we say get type by metadata name. So I know the type is called Minsk code analysis syntax dot syntax node, right? And now what I want to do is I want to say syntax node types is types where the type is not abstract and is derived from t comma syntax node type, which unfortunately also doesn't exist in Roslyn, so I have to write this ourselves. So one thing I think I will do is I will file a bunch of bugs against Roslyn for APIs that I think are commonly used, that I keep writing myself, and then see where this is going. So this is a type, and this is, let's call this base type. So what we want to now do is we say while type is not null, type is type base type, and then we say if type equals base type, return true, otherwise return false. So this might be tempting. I think we will get a warning for that, or a compiler error. Yeah, sure. Let's remove this for a moment. Here we go. Compare symbols correctly. So this is line 52, and that should be, here we go, line 52. So it looks very innocent, right? You just compare whether two symbols are the same. Yeah, unfortunately, reality is more complicated than that. So in Roslyn, again, the way I understand it is that symbols are not shouldn't be compared by reference equality because of the way the compilation works and how symbols are being potentially reused. So what you're supposed to do is, instead of doing this, you're basically saying symbol equality comparer default dot equals, for example. And then you can say and that should no longer give us a warning. Here we go. So now we hopefully have this, and so what I will now do is I will create myself a string builder, because we all like string builders. No, I will not create myself a string builder. That's what I did when I was playing with this, and it was a pain in the ass. What I really want to do is I want to have a string writer. And then I will give myself an indented text writer, new indented text writer for the string writer. And now we are missing probably a bunch of usings. And this is where there. Okay, fine. And then because we should be good citizens, yeah, I know there's a shorter version for that. I'm not a fan of the using declarations. I like the good old using thingy here. And so within this guy, we can now say for each var type in syntax node types, and then we just say, actually, let's do this. Actually, we don't have to do this. On second thought, we just say var. Actually, we do have to do this. Actually, we don't have to do this. Do you have this sometimes where you're just like, yeah, I could do this. Oh, I could do this. Oh, no, actually. So now what we do is we say var. Here's our syntax. No, our source text. And then we say here our source text. Source text equals source text from string writer to string, and then encoding UTF-8. Right? What exactly is your problem? Oh, because I didn't call it source text. It would help to have consistent naming. And now what I will do is I would say for each of those guys we say indented string writer, write line, what is that, assembly, system reflection, assembly, meta, data. And here we go, that is the type name. Let's call this type name, and then the value, we just do an empty string. Very lengthy way to write some stuff into the compiler so we can actually see whether it worked. There we go. These are all our syntax types that are non-abstract and derived from syntax node. So far, so good. Now let's actually do something useful with that information. So now the question is, how do we figure out what to do? So first things first. The type needs to be partial. If the type is not partial, stuff won't work. So in order to make our lives easier and not have to do everything at once, how about we just mark this guy as partial? I don't think you can do that, right? Because, yeah, there's no such thing as partial on an actual symbol, right? Partial only makes sense on the declarations. But what I can do is I can say declaring syntax references. Now how about we do this the other way around? You know what? Doesn't matter. For now, it doesn't matter. var directory name. So now we go to this type here. We say declaring syntax references first, syntax tree, file path. So we say this is our syntax node file name. Then we can say syntax directory is path.getDirectory name for this guy. And so I would cheat right now. I would literally just write the file back into that directory because it's easier. And then we say for file name is path.combine syntax directory, and we call this SyntaxNode.GetChildren.txt, and I do a txt so that it doesn't become part of the compilation. And then we just say, can I do this? Right. Fine, be like that. Using var writer as file fine. New stream writer file name. What do you want? Helps to pass in the right things. So let's run this once. Here we go. Here's our file. And right now the file is empty. That is curious. Oh, because we commented this stuff out. Not very helpful. Here we go. So here's our stuff now. So it's actually easier for us to see what's going on. All right, so first things first, we will write a few lines here. We'll say, we want a namespace, obviously. So we say this is a namespace, Minsk code analysis.syntax. And it helps to spell stuff correctly. Now the magic here, I can actually increase the indentation, indent plus plus. Indent what is the, wasn't there like a text that was specified for the index? So indent is this guy. Oh, I guess I pass it to the constructor, right? The tab string is in our case 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces. All right, so now we can do this, and then we can do that. And of course we have to unindent here. And then in our case, we just write a class declaration. So that would be partial class type name. And then same thing here. And this is where the magic goes. you should get the namespace from the compilation. Yeah, maybe, but look at all the stuff here. So we make a bunch of assumptions here. So like, I don't know whether that is worth doing. Like, it is basically a generator that is very specific to our syntax, right? So our conventions, I guess. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a convention-based syntax generator, right? So I could probably extract some of the namespaces into local variables that are constants or something to not have to replace it, but I think for now this is overkill. So what's not happening here? Oh, because now, okay, so we emitted all of this stuff here, so it's fine. Of course, now the problem is none of the types are partial, right? So now I have to go here and say for every single fucking class partial. Did I just say for every single? Yeah. I need to use my censor button here. All right, so we have this guy. I guess now it's just a bunch of clicks here. I mean, if this would be a lot of work, I could probably tool this as well with Roslyn, but when it's like 30 things, then usually it's easier to actually do this by hand. All right. Partial class. Partial class. Partial class. Another partial class. Actually, this guy. No, anything that is abstract doesn't need partial. This guy is not an actual syntax node. We don't need to do anything for that. This guy is sealed, so it needs partial. This guy is sealed, so it needs partial. This guy needs it. This guy needs it as well. I mean, that's a general pattern. Like every single time you want to have a class participate with a source generator, you have to effectively mark it partial so that you can generate new members. Because you don't get to modify this file, right? You only get to modify, or you only get to add new files to the compilation, right? For some reason this is not even sealed, but it should be sealed. Internal sealed partial class. This should be partial. Partial. Same here. This should be sealed. Sealed partial class. Alright, so now we should at least get no errors anymore. Missing partial syntax on syntax token. Yes. So syntax token itself we should skip. Yeah, so syntax token is one of those things where we can decide what to do. Probably the easiest way for us right now is to say this is not partial. But then I don't know how to detect this here yet. I guess I know how to detect it, but yeah, let me just write one. It's partial. Basically the way it would work is you say you go over all the syntax declaration. You say for each var declaration in type syntax references if, and then of course these guys are what? Syntax references. Okay. and this one probably has a get syntax. Well, syntax. And then I probably have to do something like yeah, what in our case this is a class declaration, so if syntax is class, do we have this referenced yet? We have not. What is a class declaration syntax? In our case, we know these are always classes, and then we can say if class declaration modifiers for each var modifier in class declaration modifiers. You might be able to generalize this depending on where the modifiers are on. There are on. Nice. We can probably say type declaration syntax, right? Type declaration syntax here. And then it works for all types. And then we can say if modifier I think we want to say value text. So the difference here between text and value text is, again, I think last time I looked, text I think is the actual representation in text. So for example, you can have an ampersand, you can do things like this, right? You can say var class, right? You can escape keywords, for example, in C#. You can also have ASCII escapes in there and stuff like that. And so I think, generally speaking, you're supposed to use value text if you want to compare them like this. And then you can say return true, otherwise you say return false. I think. All right, so this should be good enough. And then we can say here where and is partial and is derived from. It was very lengthy just so that we can say here, remove the partial from this guy. Sorry, remove the partial from this guy. Oh, this guy isn't partial. Ah, okay, fine. Then this should be fine. Yeah, now it's filtered out, which now means if I go here in my file here, syntax token is no longer found, right? And so the reason you want to do this is you want to go here, you want to say this method here is now, oopsie, this method here is actually abstract. Doop, 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 doop. All gone. And now here we have to override this, right? I guess then I will type it myself. IEnumable. Actually, why would I do this? Copy paste for the win. Override, and we say return array empty for syntax node. And now, of course, we need a few usings here. What is happening here? All right, so now it should compile again. Except, of course, that we don't generate these guys yet. Is there no way... I suppose there is no way to construct syntax nodes and pass them to the compiler instead of generating and then parsing source text. Do you think that would be a good feature, or would be too verbose to construct code in this way? So the other thing you can do with source generators is there is this thing called additional files. So if you think of the compiler as a command line tool that gets passed a bunch of arguments, one of the arguments you are passing to the compiler is the DLLs that have the analyzers or source generators in them. And another thing you can pass is called additional files. And as far as the compiler is concerned, additional files are not processed at all. They're just assumed to be text files. So the only thing the compiler does is, I think, it loads the text files and makes them available in the compilation object. And usually the way you use additional files is that you can pass additional state to the compiler. So a good example here is our resx files, right? Resx files are XML files. And then the idea would be, if we have a source generator based resx generator, basically we would pass the resx files to the compiler, and then the compiler would, the source generator would just walk all the resx files and then just generate effectively our strongly typed resource access. And we could do the same thing. In fact, that's kind of what Roslyn does as well. Roslyn defines all the syntax nodes as an XML document. So we could pass that XML document to the compiler and then have the compiler literally emit the entirety, not just the one method, but literally defining all the types. And then every single time I want to add a syntax node, we just edited that XML file. We could do that too. I'm at this point undecided whether that is better or worse. I actually like the idea of using C# as my configuration language rather than some other proprietary DSL language like an XML file or a JSON file or some other crazy flavor of the day. God forbid I would use YAML, because YAML is already used way too much as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, I mean, that's another way you could do it, right? So in this case, you would basically say, we never have to type any of the type structure because it's completely externally defined. That would also work. Is regex an example of using source generators? Maybe. I mean, you could imagine that a source generator would walk the program and find all cases where you construct a regex and then effectively use C# to emit effectively the regex state machine. The problem with that, and that's kind of what we want to do for JSON serialization. The trick here is you can't change the call side, right? So you would have to find a way to say, okay, I can register via some other mechanism, via just, either DI or some global registration where you can say, okay, if you ever want to deserialize this type, here's the method that does that, right? And then our runtime would be able to find that. You have marked expression syntax as partial even though it is abstract. Okay, that would be a mistake on my end. So this looks good, this looks good. Sealed partial, sealed partial, sealed partial, sealed partial, more sealed partial, abstract part. Okay, this one is wrong. Sealed partial, sealed. I mean, it's not wrong, it's just unnecessary, right? Okay, here's our new file. Sealed partial, more sealed partial. Okay, this is fine. So now we get all these errors here because well, now we need to override this guy. So let's actually do this. Let's actually emit the code that does that. And again, we are starting simple. So we have to do that as well. Now let's emit the method body. So this would be public I guess in our case you would qualify it system. You know what? We control the whole thing. Let's write some using statements so we don't have to qualify fucking everything. Using system collections generic, using system collections immutable, and then while we are at it, might as well make it somewhat readable. Yeah, here we go. All right, so then we can say public enumerable of syntax node get children, and of course we have to say override here, override. By the way, I hope that eventually we don't have to do this, right? I mean, on the one hand side, I like string-based generation because it's brain dead simple. On the other hand, it results in some fragility because, well, first of all, I have to define some sort of formatting here. And I think ideally we would like to use the formatting that whatever the person whose project we're emitting into is using, so that when they look at the generated code, they feel like it's part of the same compilation. You know, braces are in the right spot and stuff like that. But also because you have to be careful with like aliasing, right? So like, what if this doesn't resolve for some ambiguity reasons, right? Normally in source code, you would just add a using statement, but for generated, or not the using statement, like a using alias, or, you know, you qualify names if there are conflicts. But for generated code, you don't get to do that usually. So you want to make sure that stuff is basically unique by construction. So ideally, Roslyn would have some APIs where you can emit this stuff here. Maybe not as a tree API. I'm not a fan of like the syntax node APIs to construct syntax nodes, but you could imagine a writer that instead of basically doing write line, you have, you know, write method declaration, or, you know, something like that, where you can pass in as symbol names, and then the compiler will make sure they're actually resolved, and, you know, the source code that is emitted is unique and fully qualified and stuff like that. Basically what CodeDOM does. I mean, that's really the way to think about it. Anyway, so we have this one now, and then basically in our case, in order to make it compile, we will do something really ugly. We just say return array empty syntax node. Rebuild. Oh, have I used the word again? That is so bad. I need... Yeah, yield break would also work, but... Our bigger problem is we don't have a semicolon here. But yeah, why not? Let's use yield break. For shits and giggles. Do not hit save. But you expect a semicolon everywhere. So that seems like... I think I didn't hit save. No. Okay, now I'm confused. What could possibly be wrong here? Oh, because it's yield return. I swear to God. It's a yield break. I have typed C# before. I have not done this for the first time, I swear. Alright, unary expression that does not implement inherited abstract member get children. I guess unary expression we probably forgot to mark partial. Unary expression syntax. Yep, it's not marked partial. Let's try this one more time. Nice, nice, nice. All right, so now the compilation succeeds. Right, clearly we get 0 errors. And you might be wondering, okay, why that is, why the fuck is it, why is everything red on the left-hand side here? And the answer is because we're in preview right now. So actually OmniSharp, and I think even in VS, we don't know yet about this generated syntax, because generated syntax is implicitly made part of the compilation, but OmniSharp doesn't know that. And so as far as OmniSharp is concerned, like, we don't have any type here. So what I will do, which is horrible, but it's, you know, given that we're in preview mode, it's a nice hack. What I will do instead of doing this, so normally we'd do this. Oopsie. But the IDE doesn't won't see the generated code yet. So what I will do instead is I will do this. Yeah, exactly. It's dirty, but it will work. So if I now do that, well, I say it doesn't. Oh yeah, now it will work. Right? So let me explain what happens right now, because that is somewhat confusing. So let me delete this while here. So now we emitted this file, and now the file is part of the compilation because it's, you know, a CS file. And so now everything resolves. But the problem is, at some point, when you git clone this repository, this file here doesn't exist yet, right? So the first time you run this, it will not succeed. So you have to basically compile twice. And of course, that's not great, right? But unfortunately, there's nothing we can do right now to make both the IDE work and the first time command line build work. And so for the time being, I will effectively just use this hack here. Let me actually make sure you're on the same page. Hack. To do remove hack. Let's do that. Which is basically our temporary workaround for this. Now you could do this today already, right? Like there's nothing preventing you from doing that. But what's quite elegant is that we at least get access to the compilation and all of that stuff. So we are like 50% integrated. Eventually we'll get 100% integrated. But for now, this is good enough. All right, now we have to actually do something smart here. So far we have only generated some boilerplate, which is not super useful. So now let's talk about how we actually, maybe we should rename this guy at this point. Let's call this SyntaxNode.GetChildren generator. So let's close all but this. Close others. Fine. So one thing we can do here is we need to now think about how do we determine what things to return, right? And so we could either look at the properties, which is what we did in our reflection-based code, but that's not ideal because I don't think there is a requirement that says the order in which symbols are returned matches the order in which they are declared in the file. But I think for the time being, that's what we will do. I mean, eventually we could also just move to the constructor because the parameter order is, of course, well defined in metadata. And we could just look at the constructor. But for the time being, maybe it's easier to just look at the properties. Yeah, what the heck? Let's just look at the properties for now. So we would say for each var property in type property. Yo, that's cool. In type there are no properties on the type, but there's members, so that works fine. Members of type I property symbol. There you go. And then we can just say for each var property I guess no, we're already on the properties. Let's just emit them right now as a comment, so we see what ends up happening. Right line, and let me just say this is property name. When I was playing with this earlier, I found out this incremental process of just doing like one step at a time is actually quite useful, because then you see what ends up happening. So let's this file open. So kind is something you want to skip. So basically what you want to do is you want to only look at properties that are that have a type that is derived from yeah, I guess we don't want to do that. So there's basically three different things you want to handle. Property type is derived from syntax node. That's the simple case. Then property type is immutable array of t where t some syntax node. And then there is separated syntax list of t where t syntax node. So these are basically the patterns you want to look for. So let's start with the simple case and say if is derived from property type syntax node type, then we can just say yield return property name. Okay, or derived from doesn't like this apparently, so let's simplify this to I type symbol. I'm sure this won't compile, but let's try anyway. Oh, it actually does compile. And of course, we forgot our semicolon again. Here we go. That's not bad, and then we can just remove this line here entirely. Right, so this starts to look like kind of what we want. So here's the separated syntaxes of the arguments, for example, and here's an immutable array with the statements. So these are probably the things that we need to fix now. So please add 3 exclamation marks to do. Yeah, I mean, yeah. Don't I have something like what is this? Don't I have like a okay, we have this. Okay, let me, what is that? To do. Maybe not. What did we do here? Text files. Really? We don't have a single to-do occurrence? I think my alias might be wrong, but yeah, there's a decent amount of to-do markers that I will at some point look at, but that sometime is not today. I mean, that's one thing you have to be good at. If you're a developer, you kind of have to decide when to put things off and when to actually do them. So I actually like to do markers, but you have to be disciplined, right? Eventually you have to just go over them and resolve them, right? Or, I mean, either resolve them or remove the comment, right? Yeah. But in our case, there's nothing we can do about this right now. Right, so let's start with the immutable array thing. So how do we know whether something is an immutable array? So first of all, we need to ask for some more types. So we can, the nice thing with this get metadata API is we can ask for any type that is referenced in the compilation. There can be also external types. So I can say immutable and then immutable array. But it's the metadata name, and the metadata name has a backtick 1 for a generic that takes one argument, or backtick 2 for one that takes 2, like dictionary. And then we call this immutable array type. And then we do the same thing for our separated syntax type, separated syntax list type. Which is, let me just copy and paste this because there's not a lot of hope that I get this right the first time. And we don't want to have typo errors here. Okay, so here are 2 types. Now what we have to do is we can say, okay, if it's not one of those, then we can say else if we can say property type is named type symbol. Actually, it is a named type symbol. Property. So basically what I need to know is I need to know whether it's the constructed generic type. What is happening here? Property. Yeah, so I think I need to have it. I need to check whether it's a name type symbol, I think. And then this guy has type parameters or type arguments. So let's see whether these are defined. I think they're defined only on name type symbol. Yeah, I think only name type symbols can be instantiated, so that's fine. So we can probably simplify this code here quite a bit and just say this only makes sense in general when we have an iname type symbol. If property type is named type symbol, property type and then we can say property type, and then we can say else if property type type parameters, property type parameter type arguments, length is 1, and original definition. Remember what I said earlier about the symbol comparison? Symbol quality comparer default equals what is that? Syntax this guy and immutable array type. Is derived from this guy. Probably we should do this for readability purposes. Can probably remove this one now. And then we can say is derived from syntax node, right? Syntax node type. And okay, and then the same thing here for our other type, which is separated syntax list type. Right? So what do we want to do in this case? Well, in this case, we would say for each var child in property name, and then for sanity, we just do this, and then we just here return child. Yeah, I think I just crashed. I think the problem might be that I think the equality comparator doesn't like it when there's null being passed in, which seems buggy. So let me do this then. Length is 1, and I mean, not that the readability here is particularly good. Probably should extract that into a function or something so it's actually readable. Okay, maybe not. Well. Then let's do it the hard way. Printf debugging. I'm unhappy right now. Don't you hate when that happens? You can't, something doesn't work, then you add error checking to it, and then it suddenly works. I'm a sad punter. There's no for each. Really? Did you comment all of this out? I'm very confused right now. Oh, I'm an idiot. Of course I'm an idiot. Alright, let's do this. The problem is that I'm printing to the console, but I suspect that this is going nowhere in MS Build. Yeah, so what we will do instead is we will do this, and we will just say source text. And then of course the source text is something we have to move out of here. Let's try one more time. Yeah, the indentation I didn't fix because I guess there's a problem now with my what? Braces are mismatched? Is that what's happening? I guess we need to add it there or something. The type immutable array doesn't exist in the current context. How is that possible? Oh. Yeah, that explains why we are crashing. This is where the refactoring stuff wasn't happy. I think we renamed this, and that's why we're crashing, because this guy has no syntax references. And then of course we can't do that anymore because yeah, so let's move this guy down here. But of course now we don't know we're crashing. And now we should have a for each somewhere in here. No. Okay, that's a different problem now. So immutable array type. Well, it's called collections. Let's start with that for a moment. Well, that didn't fix much. Now you have to run it again. No. Okay, system collections, immutable array, immutable array. Well, probably would help to type that correctly too, but so property type arguments has length 1. Property type argument 0 is syntax node type, or is derived from syntax node type. Symbol equality, property type, original definition, immutable array type. Yeah, this should be the right way to do it. So why does that not work? Yeah, that's also true. There should not be return, there should be yield return child. But that's not the problem right now. The problem is we're apparently never emitting this case, which oh no, actually I know what the problem is. We need to hit rebuild again. That's what I said earlier already. This worked really well. We did a rebuild. Well, that makes sense, but why do you not compile anymore? Same problem here, because we renamed everything. Yeah, that's the problem. I did a copy paste for one statement, then I renamed it, and then I basically everything else. All right, so now this guy should do that. Okay, that's fine. Now we do that. That's also fine. And now we have to syntax node type. Nice, nice, nice. So now it should actually work. All right, so far so good. So kind we don't want to emit. Yes, that's true. Arguments. So this is the next thing we want to do is arguments. So it's kind of the same thing here. And that should, generally speaking, work unless we messed up the rest. Maybe not. Okay. If original definition is separated syntax list type and type argument 0 is derived from syntax node type. Oh, well. Need to actually implement it. So it's almost very similar, but if we go back to our syntax node type, separated syntax lists are slightly different. We have to say get with separators because by default we don't return them. So it would be this. Ay, that seems to work. Now we can remove this code here and everything should be hunky-dory. Ta-da! So now the only thing that I don't like right now is that we have to run it twice at times. So one problem that we have is if the generator doesn't... Yeah, so let's delete this thing and see what happens. Delete. Yes, delete permanently. So now it will fail to compile. So can we make this work? So if the file doesn't already exist, so we can do this, right? If the file does not exist, or file get all text. What? Yeah. Read all text. Read all text. File name is not the same as our source text to string. Produce error. So the way we produce an error right now is also super lame. Let's do the other way around. Original existing text is if the file exists, it's this, otherwise it's this. If, and then we can just do this, write it actually down. It doesn't really matter, I guess. And then we cheat here and we produce an error. And the way I produce an error right now is super lame, but it will work. Generated code changed. Please compile again. This will at least give people actionable error messages. So if we do this, everything's fine because nothing changed. Now when I delete this guy, then I get these guys here, which is funny. If the file didn't, I guess, should have done this right anyway. Alright, if the existing text is not the same as the generated one, then produce this error. Nice. Not perfect, but again, this is a temporary hack. This is not going to be the shipping version of this. Alright, so then this makes me happy. Alright, so now we have these guys handled here, which now also means we have this method here, which is quite nice. Yeah, so I think the one thing I want to do in the generator here is I want to remove this weird error handling hack here, because it also makes the code fairly unreadable. And everything should still be hunky-dory. Yeah, so far so good. Now, we haven't done much, except that we have avoided some copy and paste error, but I mean, this is 230 lines of code, and our generator is about the same size, so I'm not sure we saved a lot of keystrokes today. But what's nice is that we can, instead of having to mess with all of this stuff, is if I now add something here, right? If I say like, what would be a good example? Let's say our or what do I know? Our binary expression syntax. Let's say there's an optional thing that we can pass in, which is an expression syntax. You know, optional thingy, right? I can now, which is null. which is important so that the rest of the stuff compiles. But now instead of me doing any work, I just recompile. Oh, damn it. Yeah, we have to do a property here, create initialize property optional thingy, which is not spelled correctly, but who cares for the time being. So if I now do this, I will get an error that says generated source has changed. Please build again. And now I have to build again. But now everything is nice because I don't have to think about the stuff too hard, right? And now when we go to children here and we go to binary, now we have our optional thingy here returned as well. So like, it's very hard to make mistakes now with this thing in place, which is kind of the point, right? So you handled it once and then you're good to go. Now I will say that, of course now our generated syntax is wrong, but that's an easy fix. Just build it again. Build it twice. The building twice thing will disappear, right? Eventually we'll just literally you build and everything will just work. This is just a temporary glitch because our IDE doesn't actually know about source generators. But so this is one way where we can use this feature. Another area where I would like to use the feature is in our bound tree here. We have this thing called the bound tree rewriter, which is basically even bigger, right? It's a lot of code here. So it's like what, not a lot, but it's 260 lines of code. And all it does, it just traverses our bound tree. And again, it's a very similar thing. So there's lots of busy code here, which is 100% driven by the shape of the type. So this is another prime example where it would actually be beneficial if we could simplify this and actually just generate that code. Another area where that would be useful is instead of doing this here, which is, it looks very elegant and all, but it's not very efficient, right? So what the compiler has to do here is we have to generate a state machine, or the compiler has to generate a state machine, which is actually not that efficient. I'm not sure the compiler, actually let's check. Does the compiler do anything meaningful optimization here? So that would be Minsk, bin, debug, net standard, minsk.dll. I don't think the compiler will do any meaningful optimization here. Where is this guy? Syntax, assignment. Probably have to reload this guy now. Get children. IL with C#. Yeah, you can see that what ends up happening here is the compiler generated the state machine thingy here. And then we do that, which is basically a very convoluted way to say we allocate a fairly expensive object to just do that. Instead of doing this, what would be even more efficient if we would change the code as follows. Instead of emitting these guys, we could do this. Right? So that would be quite nice because then we can also have a generic GetChildren method, which uses a struct-based enumerator to just write literally a for loop that gives you these guys, which wouldn't be super hard to write. And then basically walking now the syntax is allocation free. That would be very nice to do. Why must the IDE support generators? Well, the problem is that the IDE has to know effectively to pass the data along for the ride, right? So, I mean, IDE is one of those convoluted terms, right? But if you think about what OmniSharp, or in this case VS Code, more generally speaking, has to do is it has to effectively load the MS Build project. It has to evaluate the project references. It has to do this thingy that we did here, right? In our project file. We said this, right? Right. So the IDE has to know that effectively when we pass these analyzers down, that they are passed to the compiler, right? The way this works in Visual Studio, and it actually might work in Visual Studio out of the box already, is that Visual Studio hijacks the CSC task, which is effectively the thing in MS Build that just invokes the compiler. And it replaces that with an in-memory representation that basically is the language service that you know, reports IntelliSense and all the other stuff. And that thing has to effectively get all the analyzers and then pass them on, right? Because when you're building on the command line, you're effectively doing one thing. If you're running in the IDE, you're not actually emitting code to disk, but you have to evaluate things in a very similar way to what you do in the on the command line. But there's two things that has to happen, right? On the command line, you only do the whole thing once. In the IDE, you keep doing this thing over and over again, right? So one of the things the IDE has to do is it has to unload the old analyzer, load the new analyzer, and then run again, right? On the command line, we get that for free because we create the entire process tree and then we shut the entire process tree down, right? So every single time you start with a fresh, empty process. In the IDE context, that's not the case, right? Everything is already in memory. So if the analyzer keeps changing, well, some party has to unload the analyzer and load the new version of the analyzer because we build the analyzer as part of our project, right? And so that part, my understanding is that part is not done in Visual Studio. So right now, when you keep editing your analyzer, I don't think the IDE unloads this guy every single time. Yeah, David Wenger works on the the Visual Studio project system team, so he probably did a way better job explaining that I just did. Yeah. All right, so I think for today, I mean, we just spent almost 2 hours on this. I think I'm happy with the progress. This is something that we would do in a later episode, I think. Because it's not the only thing we have to do. We also have to, hey, you know what? Let's try it. How hard can it be? Let's maybe commit what we have so far and then just see what we can do here. So did we actually delete this? No, we did not. We just commented it out. So now is the time I delete this syntax. Syntax node. Where's this guy? Here's the guy. Let's get rid of all of this. All right, now we have to decide how we deal with that one. I think I will do a naming convention for now because it seems cleaner. Where's our generator? So we will change our hint text to let's do that, and then let's delete this guy here. Delete. .NET build rebuild. Alright, so now we have this guy. I need to run this again, and then I think I have to exclude the file from my git ignore. So Minsk specific excludes star.generated.cs. I hope that's the right syntax. Okay, we fix this, fix this, fix that. Yep. I don't know what just happened, but apparently my girlfriend destroyed the kitchen. At least that's how it sounded like. Alright, so now we have this. Now let's actually commit that and say replace. No, there's no way I will type this in the command line. Replace reflection based get children with a generated one. All right. This is also nice touch here. So because we added it to our git ignore file, this thing is now grayed out. So it's there, but kind of know that it's not the one you want to mess with. Yeah, you might need */ generated CS, but like seems to work. I think that's probably the default. All right, so look. This is now grayed out. We can actually remove it now. Oh, we should have done that. That's a nice touch. All right, so yeah, so now let's actually try this, what I just said. So if we go here, we would have to pass in two methods. Can I do F12 on this guy? Isn't there like a navigate to base or something? Apparently not. So what we can do, so we can cheat for now and say there's an abstract int get child count, and then there is a get child int index, which returns the syntax node. Syntax node, right? And then we can say this is no longer abstract, right? For now we would just cheat and say get child count, right? And then we say yield return get child for I. Of course, this is exactly as inefficient as what we currently do, but we can optimize that part later. Of course, now nothing compiles anymore. So next step. Yeah, I think I just realized I might have myself pretty badly, because that is actually not that easy to do, because we now have an index that is including all these collections. So finding the right element now is not super straightforward. Yeah, you know what? I don't think I will do that today. Yeah, let's end on a high note and not in a disaster. I'm still happy with where we are. Yeah, are there any questions on anything? .NET Core related, Minsk related, generator related, life related, whatever you want to talk about, now is your time. Yeah, I think one thing I probably should be doing here, because I filed an issue on GitHub, would have been a nice touch to actually resolve this with our thing here. So reflection-based syntax tree traversal with Roslyn source generator. So that is number 114. If only I could type. Fixes. And then of course we do PR create, fill in, and I can never remember the arguments, I guess. Let's try. Oh, it is exactly what I thought it would be. Bummer. Fill in, draft. Yeah, that will fill the CI builders. You need to compile twice. I think we can probably work this around. Yeah, I think the failed. Actually, that's a good point. I think we can fix at least that part of it. Yeah, so the problem is if the file doesn't exist at all, we can actually fix it in this instance. What we can't fix is if the file already existed, but now it's different, if that makes sense. So let's we call this file path. And then we call this guy here var. I guess file path is good enough. Let's keep this file name. And then let's use this guy here. Yeah, so let's do this then. Let's do, so if file exists, then we do one thing. Else we do a different thing. So then we do this. Right. Yeah, so I guess this is exactly what we want to do here, is we only do this one. Yeah, I think this should fix CI. So if we now delete the file, and we now build, now this should succeed because we just add the data to the compilation. Subsequent build will also succeed. And then the only time that it actually fails is if we modified the stuff after the fact. Right? So this way we should. Okay, let's see. So, yes, checks failing. On this guy here, all checks are failing. Okay, so that makes sense. That's what we expected, and then we just amend our commit and push the stuff again, and that should fix our CI. I mean, in a certain sense, CI is easier because you only have to support one run. Now let's see what happens when we come back to this. Checks pending. I really like the GitHub CLI. I think I mentioned this a few times before, but to me, why it's nice is it doesn't break my workflow. I don't have to open a browser. I don't have to click around. I can just, you know, if I just want to know whether the checks are passing, I can just do that, right? And I don't even have to do this like a maniac, like every 5 seconds, but okay, that was weird. But now the question is, now it's failing, and now I actually have to do something. So now I can say PR view web, and then it actually opens the browser. Yeah, okay, this is of course not what we want. So why is it failing? Okay, this job failed. Why did the job fail? .NET build release. Huh. Yeah, I suspect the reason this doesn't work is because the version of .NET that I'm using here is 3.1. And the version that I'm using in order to use this is a preview version of .NET 5. So I guess in order to make CI work, we would have to change the way we do that. So let me, what do we do in CI here? Interesting. Don't we acquire .NET to this? I thought we did. But there's also a way to do this, I believe. So let me just, what's the easiest way to do that again? Let me browse my branch. Episode branch. Okay, so now let's edit this guy here. Oh, that's right. I'm still in Azure Pipelines. Well, that's unfortunate, because that means I have to edit on this side here, right? Global.json. I hope not. I hope not. I don't think I need global.json. All right, let's try this again. Here we go. What do you mean I'm signed in? I would just literally clicked on sign in. What? Navigating back has lost your cookies. Now let me close Telegram again before my friend Philip gets himself fired. What do I do here? Good Telegram. Here we go. So where is this guy again? This is under. Oh, there's only like 1200 redirects. That's fine. All right. So now here in the pipeline thingy, where's this guy? Let me expand this so I can actually see what's going on. Pipelines. Here's our pipeline. And there's, I think, a way to edit the pipeline. Oh, that's the view I wanted. So there is a way to .NET Core. Use .NET Core, yes. And we want SDK and we want the version, include pre-release versions. .NET. Let's see, what version do we need? I've not downloaded it apparently in a long time. I don't even know where to click. Alright, this would be this one here, I believe. So let's get this guy going. Beautiful. That's exactly where I wanted to insert it. Totally okay. There we go. I think this is the right way to do it. Yeah, almost. Use preview version of .NET Core for CI. No. Of .NET 5, please. All right. Let's try this again. Yeah, the signing seems to be, how do I say this nicely? Fairly. But yeah, here we go. The job is running now. Use.NET failed. No matching SDK version copy found with version 5 of preview 3. Kindly note the preview versions are only considered in latest version searches if include version checkbox is checked. Did I do this the wrong way? YAML. We will never be friends. .NET Core. Use .NET Core. Include preview version. Do I even have to specify a version? Probably not, right? I probably get away with specify to install versions can be given the following formats. Find the value of the version for installing SDK runtime from the release.json, the link to release.json, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, probably not a winning proposition in searching this guy here, right? Maybe we're screwed. Because honestly, I have no idea whether this file actually even contains preview information. Also, what happens if I don't specify a version at all? Then it's blank. That's not great. What if I do that? Maybe, just maybe. Maybe I'm too early for this feature. Maybe we have to figure out the way to do this feature later. All right, so let's do this. Use latest preview version of .NET Core for CI. I mean, that would be fairly fucked if that would work. Fairly. I need to be better with moderating my language, apparently, but this is what happens when you're in the middle of something. It's always frustrating when everything works, but then you can't get the bits to actually do meaningful things. All right, so where's our website? Let's see again what happens here. It's running. It's doing its thing. Now it uses 2.164. No, hopefully that's not the one. No, it uses .NET Core 3.1 apparently. So I guess that is, if you don't specify a version number, it uses the latest version from there. Yeah, we are probably somewhat out of luck for CI. Tragic. I guess that's one of the things I will take to work on Monday. I will figure out how I get the latest version of .NET Core in my CI builds. Pretty sure there's a way of doing it. You know what? I think there's a good point. Maybe my XDK version is wrong. Maybe .NET info. What am I running on? I'm not even running on .NET Core 5.0. What? Now I'm very confused. Okay, maybe I'm doing this all wrong. Almost. The pipeline has a pass rate of 81% in the last 14 days. Something tells me by the time I'm done, the pass rate will be significantly lower than that. Here we go. Use.NET failed because it can't find the thing. Did I mess up the version again? I don't think so, right? That was the right one. I used the SDK one, not the runtime one. Yeah. 3.1.300 preview 15.1.1.5. That's the same one I have in my file, right? Yep, 3.1.300 preview 15.1.1.5. Yeah, the index file is interesting in general. Like, I don't quite know how that works. Yeah, that's also possible, Lucas. He said that the preview syntax might be specific to .NET and not for the preview task. Okay, let's ask the internet. Use .NET. Use this task to acquire a specific version of .NET Core. Blah 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 blah. Okay, this is 2x. Blah blah blah. I'm using the wrong task, the wrong version of that task. .NET Core installer. Am I using the wrong task? I think that's progressively getting more likely that I'm using the wrong task here. .NET no, build. Okay, so that's not it. .NET, use .NET Core. Lucas, how do you use the .NET Core installer? You just paste it in? Is that really what happens? These XAML files are a charm to work with, so... Really? I search for .NET Core installer, this thing shows up. I click on the page, I search on the page, string doesn't exist on that page. What the... yeah, maybe I should just look at this guy here. It's probably in this repo somewhere, right? .NET Core installer. Hopefully there are some samples here. Or not. Yeah, maybe that's Bing, but I don't think that's Bing. You can try Google as well, but I kind of doubt that this leads to better results. Yep, and points to the exact same page. And how about we search in there? Beautiful. Beautiful. Am I looking at the wrong thing? Is there like a preview thingy I can toggle or something? Doesn't seem like it. This is Lucas, would you mind copy and pasting the entire YAML section that you have for the .NET Core installer? Not just the name and the version number? Just don't ask what C# Fritz thinks of YAML files, and especially in combination with anything Azure related. Well, I mean, people always complain about white space choices, and then there's often the instinct to say, well, if the language would make white space mandatory and would enforce certain white space rules, then we wouldn't have all these discussions. While that might be true, the real problem with that is that now you have these very weird bugs where, because you messed up one space, the whole file meant something completely different. And I can't count the number of times where I looked at my YAML file and I would get weird errors, and it turns out there's an extra space somewhere, and it is extremely frustrating. I mean, at least in YAML, it's only leading white space. Like Markdown has this weird behavior where if you have two trailing spaces, that means a line break. I mean, that's even worse. Okay, so then let's try this. I think I said earlier something like, how hard can it be? And turns out it was very easy to... Okay, so the version number, so it's also version, right? Inputs and then version. Okay, so then... Let's try this one. Oopsie. Yeah, I almost messed up my entire YAML file. So what is this thing here? So .NET Core installer. Oh my god, there's a PR. We can actually look at stuff. Yeah, so what I really want to see is the other properties for this guy. All right, then let's do this. GitHub. What was the repo this was in? This was the one. .NET Core installer. Task.json. Description, help URL, help markdown category. Inputs, name, package type, label. Version. Target. Okay, so it doesn't seem like there's another property for preview versions, which kind of makes me hopeful. Of course, now I have so many browser windows open that I kind of lost track of what's happening here. That's the nice thing when you use multiple monitors or multiple virtual desktops, that eventually you no longer know what you're looking at. So what is this guy here? So let's try this again. CI run. Other CI run. Did I not push? No, I didn't push. Then I can wait there for a very long time. It already failed. Now that's depressing. YAML. Beautiful, beautiful piece. What did I mess up? Line 17. Block sequence. What are you talking about? I mean, this is exactly the same thing as here, right? I don't understand YAML. What is happening here? Does anybody know what I messed up? Oh, I guess. Maybe I didn't hit save. Oh, yeah, okay, that makes more sense now. Sanity restored. So what are the bets that this will just work? Close to 0. There we go, don't installer failed. Why did it fail? Because it can't find the version number. No matching SDK version could be found for specified version 3.1.300 preview blah. Kindly note the preview versions are only considered in the latest version searches if include preview version. Checkbox is checked. You're a funny fucker. Just so you know. Because I think clearly you're not... Okay, can I actually work on this one here? So what happens if I paste this in? Do I get UI for that? That would be extremely convenient. Settings. Magic. Package type, version. So it is the same thing. Okay, maybe then. I'm very confused by this, I have to say. I'm not entirely sure why that is. Okay, let's try this again. Force pushing until stuff builds. It's my favorite hobby. It seems to be the norm of YAML files too, is like you keep pushing to the CI server and eventually you get a green build and then you're not touching it for the next 6 months if you can help it. Okay, now it failed, and let me guess. Can't find the version number even though it's now preview is enabled. Could not be found in its channel. Oopsie daisy, now I kicked my camera. What happens if I click on this guy? Okay, that's fine. Here's a README file. Specify a version of the SDK to install. It allows you to always get the latest version in a minor or major version. See below for examples. I guess my problem is maybe the preview version that I'm using I got from some weird VS build that actually is not in the feed. Refer to this link. Okay, so then maybe let's try this one here. I mean, what could possibly go wrong? It's not like stuff is working right now. Yeah. Poke, poke, poke. I keep getting lost in all my tabs here. Okay, so here we go again. Yes, not working stuff can't possibly work less. You'd be amazed. 504 preview 3 is not allowed. Allowed version types are major version, minor version, major version, minor version, patch version. Okay. Why did it not complain about this before? I mean, clearly that's also not following that then. Also, the file you referred me to earlier actually has this entry in it. Yeah, maybe that's the string I need to use. I guess that's the string I need to use. Okay, fine. Let's try this again. I mean, I don't know why people would have trouble finding the right string here. It seems pretty straightforward. Alright, do it again. Well, docs are not lying. They're just not telling you the full story. I mean, they might be lying by omission. Here we go. Preview version, blah, 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 is not allowed. You are very funny. I mean, we can also try. Let's try this for a second. Maybe just literally follow the instructions here. Let's just remove the entire string here and see what happens. Well, maybe let's first actually commit it. That might help. Pass rate of 70%. I'm doing my best. Eventually we will reach 0. Given enough time. Of course you don't like that either. Version couldn't be found. Oh, that is funny. Searching for version in channel 5. No matching SDK version could be found for specified version. Okay, then what was the file you referred me to? Okay, channel version is 5. Latest release is 5.0 preview 3. Latest runtime is 5.0 preview 3 something. I'm very confused by that. So let's search for this string, maybe in this file, maybe there's other. Nope, there's only one hit in this thing. Maybe you just want me to put 5.0 in there? Is that really what you want me to do? That seems weird, but... Ay. I'll give it a few more minutes, and if that doesn't work, I will just leave the branch open. That is also an option. I mean, the feature is cool and all, but if the feature doesn't work, then feature doesn't work. 5.0 is not allowed. Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, so I think the error message was written that you can use 5.0, but with this, you never know. So are you telling me I can literally put an X in there? That seems even weirder. But again, not that we have a lot to lose here. Okay, that one also failed. No. This one also failed because 5.0x is not valid. Right. Well, I thought it was a placeholder. I did not actually expect that you can literally type in the version X. This is the weirdest stuff. Okay, fine then. I mean, I'm also not sure why that worked because I literally had that string in there before earlier, I thought. Or did I not? I mean, I literally had that string in there, right? I mean, yeah, the build failed, but hey, one step at a time. Okay, so for some reason so the project reference has worked because we built our generators beforehand. What didn't work is our thingy there, which is weird. So why is that? I mean, I'm using 3.1. So why? So I mean, it's generally weird that it works on my machine, but because I'm not even on 5x. Maybe I'm thinking this the wrong way. Maybe. Well, how about this? At this point, let's do this. .NET blog. What did my friend Philip actually tell us to do? Need the latest .NET 5 preview, which, surprise, surprise, is this one here. So that is what I did. So why does it not work on the CI system then? Okay, maybe, okay, so this one worked, which still cracks me up, but, oh, maybe, oh, hold on. Is it possible because we pulled it, but we didn't actually use it? So let's actually make sure that when the build happened, the build actually used that particular version of .NET Core. Blah blah blah. Welcome to .NET Core 5. Okay, we're using .NET 5 preview. using some blah preview here. Using a preview version, blah, blah, blah. That is kind of strange. At this point, let's do this. Just to make sure that so yes, it does build locally. Is the generator correctly picked up when you build the solution instead of the project directly? Looks like it is, yes. So this one worked. So now let's actually do another experiment here. Let's git clean xtf everything again. And let's use my favorite tool. Our trusted Visual Studio, and see what this guy is doing. What happens if you run the same SDK locally? Great question. We should probably do that. Let's follow this link here, .NET Preview 5. .NET 5 Preview, I mean. See, we're so far in I can't even pronounce it anymore. x64. Yeah, it is possible that we are a bit early with this. I don't know about you, but there's some perverse nerve in me that actually enjoys debugging this stuff. Because usually when you do this kind of exercises, you find something interesting about the product or the system or the environment that you didn't know before. So sometimes it's insightful to do that. Yeah, maybe don't do it while Visual Studio is running. Just an idea. And then while you're at it, bye-bye. That is a severe case of, but it works on my machine. Yes, very much so. Is it a permission issue on Azure DevOps where it won't let you create the generated file? No. That would be a different error, because the order of execution goes like this, right? We generate the file might fail. Actually, that's a good point. What happens if the thing fails? Well, if the generator fails, we would accept an error message that says something like the generator didn't work, which would result in a warning. And then the build might fail later. But then we would at least see a warning in the build output, like what we did earlier, right? When we earlier had a crashing thing, we would get a warning that says the generator failed to produce output. So we would at least expect to see that. But generally speaking, it, yeah. All right, so let me close this guy here. Let's see where we are. Might as well close this guy. Close this guy. And then probably we can close all of these guys now, because that one is a solved problem. So the SDK is now installed, I believe. Oops, now I close the blog post. All right, so now let's see. So now we're running on this thing, which is the same that what we have on the CI system. So now let's nuke everything and see what happens. Interesting. So here's one of those things where git clean xdf. Let's do that. And now let's determine what actually happens here. So we have this thing called installed ms-build structure log viewer. Open project solution. So we open our thingy here, Minsk source. Where is that source? Minsk generators. No, actually not generators. I want to actually see what happens when I compile Minsk build. What? Oh, fine, be like that. Okay, so let's do this again. Alright, so now let's actually see what ends up happening here. So CSC, this is our generators version. This is our CSC task for our Minsk project. So let's see what we get actually passed. So we get an assembly passed, parameters, analyzers. So we get our generator passed. So that's interesting. So the generator makes it into the command line, which means the compiler should see it. What is the language version we are passing to the compiler? Preview. Right. So why does that not work anymore? Okay, let's do this one more time. Let's clean everything. And let's say .NET build. Okay, so this cleanly reproduces. So what's funny is, all right, so maybe did we mess up something in the realm of us committing stuff 500 times. And by we, I really mean me. It's not like this is a collective. Let's all commit as much as we can exercise. So we should have a file in here now. See, that's funny. So we don't have the file in here, which kind of means that my generator did not actually execute. Right? Because if it would have executed, it would have written the file. So, how about throw new exception? I got to this point, but then I found chocolate. Alright, let's see what happens now. Like, if what I said earlier is true, we should at least get a warning or something, but it seems like our analyzer does not load, which is weird. So why is that? I suspect the problem might be that the version of Roslyn that our generator is depending on doesn't match Roslyn that comes with the .NET 5 SDK. So when it tries to load the analyzer, that one didn't work, and then bad things happened, which is weird because I don't think I can easily check that. Yeah, how would I be able to debug that? So this is the preview version of Roslyn, so maybe let's try this for a second. So let's open this puppy here. Not quite. Let's see what the version of Roslyn this guy depends on. So this depends on wow, I did not know that IELTS also shows metadata tables now. That's actually cool. See, found out something new today. Completely unrelated a bit. Alright, so this guy references 360. 360. Okay, so then maybe what I'm referencing here is not the right version. Although I took it from the blog post, so well, how about this? What's on yuga.org right now? Packages, Microsoft, what is the name? Analyzers. I think we tried that earlier and it didn't work. Yeah, okay, so this is clearly not working. 3.0. Okay, so then what is in here? Yeah, that's what I thought. That's probably not the best way to browse that feed. I guess I do open Visual Studio after all. I'd like to point out that I'm very happy for all the people that stick around here. I did not expect that. I expected all of you to drop off once things went south. Generators, properties. No, what is it? Manage NuGet packages. Let's add a new feed. Let's call this the crazy feed. I feel like it right now. So let's go to the crazy feed and see what's in there. Analyzers. Beta 2 final. Okay, I guess there's not much option here, so I'm confused now. Where is this? So this should not be, this should be on monitor number 2. That makes more sense for me. Alright, so this uses beta 2 final and then 360 2027 2, right? 2027 2, which is the latest. Or not. There's a 3.7, but the 3.7 is probably not compatible, so yeah. Yeah, we could check a different version number here and hope for the best, but I'm not sure why that would work. If I had to guess, the assembly versions probably didn't change, so I'm not convinced this would have changed anything. But hey, let's try this again. Probably have to rebuild instead of build. Yeah. I'm pretty sure that's not the problem. That is not the problem. So how did I get this to work beforehand? Now I'm confused. So the analyzers get passed. Well, let's try something crazy. So let's remove this guy here. Let's remove all of this guy here. And let's just go back to the basics. What was that? Add additional files. Test CS. New source. Well, I guess that will not compile anyway, right? So, what is a good way for us to see that we reach this point? Yeah, I know what to do. File, write all text. Path is Minsk test. So this should avoid any issues with us causing something to not work. Now let's actually see if we didn't we change the is frustrating. We did not change the version number in the IDE. All right, let's try this then again one more time. Git, what is that? .NET build rebuild. Okay. Yeah, so we did not write the file. So clearly our code never executed. Well, let's do one more. Let's put the same stuff in here. So it's almost like our generator never gets loaded, which is very weird. So here's another fun question. Which version of VS am I on? Because maybe the version of VS that I'm on is too old. Because if that's the case, then maybe the problem is that. And that would explain why it also doesn't work on the I'm on, seems like the same version number, but so this might take 2 hours. I hope to see you guys later. Hopefully it's not that bad. Yeah, kill it, kill it. Looks like James is trying some commands. I have not set up any commands in my chatbot. I don't even know how to do that. Well, what you see there is we haven't done anything yet, except we just downloaded VS. That's why it even seems fast for you. I'm not sure this is actually taking a long time or not. James is saying I use nightbot.tv. Yeah, I will probably play with this a little bit. I'm so far not very good with integrating chat in any meaningful way. By the way, nice new frame around you. Thank you. I spent some time doing that in Photoshop earlier today. Yeah, I really have a nice camera now as well. I mean, I always had a nice camera, but the problem is my old Canon 5D Mark III is apparently not able to produce a clean HDMI. So I used this crazy software where I connected my camera via USB, which works, but USB drops the quality quite significantly. And now I moved to a Sony camera because Sony is really good when it comes to yeah, basically anything video related. I'm still more of a fan when it comes to photography with Canon because I like their menus and buttons way more, but you know, for video I think Sony is probably impossible to beat at this point. And they also have great sensors, so I can't complain. And the lens I have on top of it is pretty cool too, so it's actually quite nice. There's no green screen. This is just a really nice lens. It's a 60mm. Let me check what brand that is. Oh yeah, it's a Sigma. It's a 60mm Sigma 1.4. So That's why we have some nice bokeh going on in the background with blurry stuff and stuff. I ordered a green screen, but I don't have one yet. Yeah, the lenses kick ass. Yeah, the thing with the green screen is I was just trying to play with green screen a bit. The one thing I like about green screen is that if you key it well, meaning you don't have this green halo around you, it's actually nice that you can be basically just yourself on top of the background, so you occupy less space visually. Plus, I'm not sure I like my background. Like right now, I did some lighting and stuff, so it's not entirely boring, but it's also not the most amazing background. James says I like the lights and colors and stuff. Thank you, James. The background looks like it's out of Teams. Yeah, when Teams enabled custom backgrounds, we all went crazy. It's a coworker of mine. He works for an insurance company, and he told me that, not coworker, obviously, ex-coworker, who now works for an insurance company. And he said, like, when they had custom backgrounds, everybody went crazy. And they had some weird stuff going on where, the CTO had, like, some not entirely appropriate background picture choices. Yes, film the room when it is clean, and then you can always insert it instead of the dirty room. Backgrounds by IKEA.com. Is that an actual real website? No, I wouldn't know. That is insane. I mean, that's actually cool. I mean, that is actually genuinely funny. It is cool stuff. Also, it gives a lot of inspiration to actually build that for real. I mean, if you've never bought real estate or went house shopping, it's actually fairly interesting. So when I did it a few years ago, we visited 2 houses that were completely identical. The only difference was that one was fully furnished. Furnished, is that even a word? Like it had furniture and stuff in it. And the other one was still under construction. So all the walls were not completely done. So intuitively, you would think that the one that has furniture in it seems smaller, right? Because all the space is occupied, versus the one that is completely empty should feel much bigger. Actually, that wasn't the case. The one that had furniture in it seemed much bigger. And I think the reason is that if you do furniture well and you do colors well, you can totally add to the room. Even if all the walls are painted white, which, traditional wisdom is white looks bigger, because everything has the same color and the floor has all the same color. I think visually as a human being, we don't actually perceive depth anymore, right? So that's one of the number one things when you actually look at cinematography and stuff, that leading lines and color choices and blurriness all add to the perception of depth in the background. And so when you don't have that, the room actually feels smaller. So there certainly is something to be said for doing a room well is not easy. And there's lots of stuff you can do with color and lights. And, if you just go on YouTube and you look at all the people that are streaming, what kind of setups they have, it's sometimes really interesting. And my Visual Studio is almost done, 80% now. I mean, that is cool stuff, I have to say. Backgrounds by IKEA. I mean, there's multiple. Oh god, there's even categories. I didn't see that earlier. Celebrations. I mean, you can say a lot of things about IKEA, like that their stuff might be cheap or not the highest quality, but man, they know how to make the most out of a small space. I mean, look at this. That is beautiful. I mean, might be problematic in the Pacific Northwest because it's always rainy here, but that looks gorgeous. That is France right there. Kind of want to get a latte now. Romantic date. Now that's kind of sad. But I guess that makes sense in the times of COVID. Romantic date over Teams or Zoom. They need a category for streamers. What's actually funny is when you actually look at people's streaming offices. Like yesterday I did a pass with Olia and we just looked at all the people that are streaming. She noticed that a bunch of them have the exact same table, the exact same kind of share or lighting, and if you actually know where it's coming from, it's almost always IKEA. So there's certainly something to be said that people who are streaming are probably IKEA customers. Come on, 88%. You can do it. Yeah, back to source generators. I love the source generators. I like the idea a lot. But what you can see right now is also the reason why it took the C# team so long, because you have to design all of those things, right? Like generating code is not that hard, but what is actually hard is reasoning about all the systems and how they depend on source code and making sure that stuff just works, right? And right now you get a glimpse of what happens when stuff doesn't just work, right? It gets very quickly complicated, and we haven't really even covered the real complicated stuff in the IDE when you're editing source code, right? So I think eventually when we have IDE support for this stuff, one thing we should also make sure is that when we, edit the syntax nodes, that our generator gets kicked off. And I don't think it's super hard. I think all we have to do is just subscribe to syntax events and then just tell the compiler that if any of the types in the syntax namespace changes, please, run us again or something to that extent. So that is cool stuff. If you look at the subreddit battle stations, you can get the IKEA formula. Let me guess, that's like people sharing their home machines. Oh man, this is beautiful. Like, this is a prime example of what I meant earlier with like space. This is not a lot of space. This is a very tiny amount of space, right? If you think about it. But it's leveraged really well because this thing is just built in right in there. The colors are amazing. It's very warm. Yeah, I'm amazed by this. If you have any sort of sense for aesthetics, it's very hard not to. But even this here, like, super simple, but the colors are matching. There's some green here, some green here. It looks nice. %. Almost there. I should get a new job entertaining the crowd while Visual Studio is running. Maybe we can ship me as a animated video in the installer. I need better cable management. I totally agree. The cable management is this thing that if it's done well, it's super amazing. Yesterday I saw a YouTube video where somebody was explaining what they did and it looked beautiful. It was not a work actually, it was very simple. They did most of the stuff was just hiding behind the you know, the computer anyway, but very clean walls. Had three monitors and you couldn't see any cables coming out from them. Optimizing assemblies. We know what that means. Engine is running. Last percent takes half an hour. Yeah, maybe. Shouldn't be that long though. Maybe I should get a new computer. Oh, strike, maybe. You can always get a new computer. So James just pasted this out. Check this out. All that makes it beautiful. Artifox. Oh man. Oh, this stuff is blinking. All right, so now Visual Studio is updated. All right, everybody brace yourself. It might just work. Nope. I mean, the errors were to be expected because we deleted all the code that generated the stuff. However, you would have expected a new file to show up here, which didn't happen. Which means our generator still doesn't actually get executed. Which is extremely annoying. Yeah, unless somebody has a really brilliant idea, at this point I'm feeling I'm kind of done. Did I install the correct preview? I think I did, right? Yeah. All right, so then I think, yeah, I mean, I demoed enough today, right? So we got a sense for what it will actually look like when it's done. I think we probably will not merge this branch. We'll probably leave it in. Some sort of a, yeah, what's the best way to put it? Experimental flavor of the branch, and then we will keep working on it. I mean, maybe we can change the code slightly. Yeah, actually do this now. Let's do this. Let's at least get to the point where stuff builds. So one thing we can do is, let's just undo this. Change here. Actually, maybe that fixes that. Let's try this again. Nope, still doesn't. All right, so then let's undo this. Yeah, I guess at this point I'm kind of screwed because it doesn't even build locally. I was thinking maybe we can check in the file, but if we can't get the analyzer to run locally, then we kind of have a problem. Yeah, but that should work, right? No? How would that not work? Oh. I have one more idea. I don't think it will make a difference, but Don't you hate when you keep doing the same thing and then nothing happens? Does it build in VS? It does not build in VS. Actually, we haven't tried that. We should probably try this. It's not compatible with NetCorp 301. Oh, it's the test that failed. No one cares. Okay, we don't even build right now because we failed package restore. I'm like, oh, this is building now. Okay, let's change the test as well. Okay, still don't have it in the clipboard. Okay, one more try. And if that doesn't help, then I'm out of ideas. Okay, this does not do anything, so then let's undo these guys here. Okay, let's try VS. So somebody says there are some Roslyn issues being unable to get these to work with .NET Build with latest .NET 5 preview. So maybe my problem is then not, maybe I'm too new now. Maybe I had the exact right version of .NET Core in the box. And maybe that was my problem, that on the CI machine, I pulled down the same version I'm pulling down right now here. And that's what's actually the problem. So let's actually see when I build this guy now. Probably get the same error. Would be my guess. Generated code changed. Please compile again. Okay, so my code is at least running now. What is now happening? Interesting. So does that mean that is funny. There might be a problem in our generator now. Did I mess that one up? Yes, I did mess that up. So let me guess, if I move this guy in here. Actually, probably we should do this. Error source text. Otherwise, we never recover from the second build. Also not sure why this worked before. What? If existing text is file read all text. Either way, you just write it to disk. Is that an issue with? Maybe. So what's happening now? At this point I'm kind of confused why stuff doesn't work at all. So we write this and then we immediately override it again. Do you see that? There was a brief instance where the correct code showed up. Yep, here it goes, and then immediately gets replaced. I think I know what that problem is. I think I might have to close Visual Studio in order for the modified analyzer to sorry, the modified generator to get into the process. I thought I mentioned earlier with the IDE work not being completely done. Okay, let's close all of Visual Studio. Maybe that's the right way to do it. And also let's kill all of those guys. Append the error in the comment in the generated file. Now I don't want to do that because then it will always change, right? The whole point is that we only want to detect when the generated code actually changed, not when we did something else. And here we go. Now it just fucking works. Beautiful. Beautiful. Or not, for that matter. Interesting. Do you see this? We apparently have an issue with the order of the files. That's funny too. So that's another thing where you need to be careful when you construct these kind of guys, because generally speaking you want idempotent builds, meaning you don't want to have cases where stuff just changes randomly. So one way we can do this, we can just sort these types here. We can say sort, and then we say x comma y, and then we say x. What do we return? Full name, metadata name, compared to y.metadata name. Okay. Let's close this guy again. And now we should actually have something sane going on. Wow, today is quite a detour. I envisioned this slightly differently when I pre-visualized how the stream today will go. I did not expect that to go this way. All right. So now we have assignment expression comes first. And now when I rebuild, stuff just works. So what happens when I remove partial here and rebuild? Then we get this error here for the generated code. That's fine. Oopsie. All right, so that's fine. So what happens if I remove this guy here? I mean, I don't know why it doesn't rebuild it though, because strictly speaking, the generator doesn't have to get reloaded. We should just be able to pick up the change now because that's the way we wrote the code. Right, so why would that not work? So let me delete the file. Never mind, I think the error is there, right? Okay, the generated code actually did change. So, what was this? Assignment. All right, here we go. Assignment here. Now we add this guy back. And booyah. Assignment appears. So you might have to build, but so this is the nice thing, right? Because the generator changes relatively rarely, right? So let me add one more here. Expression syntax 2, rebuild. And now this is also returned, right? So this is actually the success scenario that I was talking about earlier. Like, now that your conventions are in place, stuff just happens to work. So now the question is, okay, it's working here. Why does it not work on the command line? I see. Yeah, we did change this one here. Avoid accidental overrides. And then make builds deterministic. Yeah, there's no way I can spell this word correctly the first time. Make builds deterministic by sorting the types. Alright, so far so fine. What I don't understand though is if we're now building on the command line, that stops working because now we are building with .NET 5's. I'll be damned. I am very, very, very confused right now. So let me close Visual Studio. Let me kill all of those guys. Let me clean everything we have here. Let's build again. Yes, okay, so now we are back to our stuff doesn't actually build. So now, let's try this. Let's kill all of those guys. Let's uninstall .NET Core 5 Preview. I mean, how bad is search in here, please? Right? Jesus. Well, at least we have search. Yes, close all of this, guys. Can we just use the generated CS for the design time builds to get IntelliSense and use the context add source? Kind of. That's basically what I'm doing by effectively overwriting the file, right? Because the first time you issue the compilation, the file doesn't exist, so I write the file. But then in order for compilation to succeed, I add the file with context.add source. Now, the next time you run the compilation, well, if the file hasn't changed, everything's fine. If the file has changed, I will just, as a side effect of running the analyzer, I will just update the file on disk and then just fail and say you have to rerun the build in order to actually get the thing going. Because there really is no way around this, right? Like, you need to have, like, unless you can always add the file to the build and everything will just work, which doesn't work for VS Code right now. You have to do this crazy thing. All right, so now we're back to where we was. Now let me try this. Git rebase episode 20 interactive. Let's clean up our commits now. So let's move these guys up. All right, so that's nice. Now let's clear everything again. And that should just work. Nice. All right, now back to square one. .NET -- info. What version are we running on? We are running on this guy. All right, so now let's try this. Let's what is it? Azure pipelines.yaml. Let's burn in this guy here. I mean, there's no way this will just work, right? I mean, the commit message is not correct anymore, but I kind of doubt that this is the last time we are pushing a change to the CI server. So what is that? TerraJobs, Visual Studio, something like this. Yeah, let's go down this path and see what happens. What is your problem? Could not be found. All right, so now we learned from last time. So now we will just say X, which I don't know, it still cracks me up. It's like the weirdest thing. All right, git push F. Let's close this guy. Now we're at 60%. We're getting there. Eventually we will hit 0. Maybe not 0, but a very small number. Okay, restore is done. And of course the build failed, because why would it just work? So what are we using here? This guy uses (31201). Okay, so now I'm curious. .NET Core .NET. I guess the build that I probably have is probably not the right build. All .NET Core downloads 3.1. So what is the latest one here? Yeah, I guess the answer is we're just screwed on this one. Because I think the version that I have locally is probably not available. It might be an actual early preview version of .NET 5 before we renamed it to 5. Or it might be an upcoming preview for an update to 3.1, which is not in our list, which conveniently this guy doesn't tell us where that is. So I guess for now we just have to accept that we can't build on the CI. Which again, now that we actually have it again running at least locally, I can cheat. And by cheating, I mean I can just go to our git ignore file. I can remove this. And then I can build again. And then for now, basically, we only use the generator so we don't have to type in the file, but we still check in the file. So that would be this one and this one. And then we say add file. And then we say git rebase episode 20 interactive. So that means we don't need this commit at all. And we merge this one with the previous one. And now when we push this whole thing, it should just build because, well, we don't need any source because we checked it in. Try to change the Azure.NET SDK to 3.1x. That's what I just did. And that didn't work. But here we go. Now we have a new kick here. And if this doesn't build, I swear I'll stop streaming. Like forever. Because clearly I'm not qualified enough to do that. Oh yeah, tests are passing. Man, we're almost streaming for 4 hours now. This is insane. But at least we're now in a state where everything is green. NCI is passing. That is more than what we can say for like 3 hours ago. I guess 2 hours ago. No. Yeah, 2 hours ago. 2 hours of writing code, 2 hours of debugging Azure. Well, it's not really Azure, it's the CI system, right? But yeah. I mean, this is the thing with tooling, right? When you when you use fancy tooling, you need to make sure that the tooling that actually works actually is on the other machine as well. And that's where we failed, right? So that's where stuff does not compose nicely. All right. Normally I end the episodes with "that's all I had," but after 4 hours, that seems a bit weird to say, because we had a lot apparently going on. We learned quite a bit. We learned about Roslyn analyzers, or generators, I should say. We looked at IKEA backgrounds. We learned that versioning is hard, and picking the right version is even harder. And yeah, I will probably have to ask a few people tomorrow what the is actually going on with the stuff. And then, yeah, I'm probably just holding it wrong, which is quite reasonable. Or I'm just on a out of sync SDK build, which is also fine. So the feature will eventually leave preview, right? And then it will be glorious, because I think we can all agree that once you have it running, it's super nice, right? You just change code, rebuild, everything is just hunky-dory. And that's always a good state to be in. All right, friends, this is all I have. I say it anyways. And I see you Wednesday. And Wednesday we will do something. I don't know what it is yet, but we will definitely do something on Wednesday. And yeah, until then, enjoy the rest of your weekend and do something fun. And hopefully it doesn't involve debugging YAML files in Azure DevOps. All right, bye-bye, friends.